Greetings and salutations, sports and wrestling fans all across the wide and wonderful internet. Time for another edition of Shibbles and Bits. Michael Shibley with you here, and today what we are going to be talking about is I just watched Netflix's newest sports documentary. It's their first one in their Untold series, and they picked a great one to start with, the Malice at the Palace. I just wrote some notes down here, so I'm going to be looking down and checking that out. But I just wanted to give you my just initial reaction and my thoughts on this one. Of course, the Malice at the Palace, for those of you who don't know, and you can just Google it, you can check it out. But it happened on November 19th, 2004. It was started, there was a fracas between the Indiana Pacers and the Detroit Pistons, almost called them Tigers, the Detroit Pistons. And then after the fracas started dying down, a fan threw a cup and hit Ron Artest in the chest as he was lying on the scorer's table. And then Ron Artest went into the stands and started punching fans. He attacked the guy he thought it was. It was not that guy. A couple of other players went in and started defending Ron, and it just became an entire mess. It was one of those instances where the sporting world made national news, and that's something that can either be great or it can be terrible. I know we talked a little bit about that with Simone Biles and the past Olympic Games, but now we go back and take a look at this documentary. And first of all, I was at a breakfast bar, essentially in Knoxville in 2004. I was still in college when I saw this happen, and I was stunned. It was one of those things where I just couldn't grasp what I was seeing with everything going on. And then, of course, the way the media spun things, it might not have been shed really in the best of light when you look back at things. And again, hindsight being 2020, but now we can go and look as we have new information, and we can finally hear both sides of the story. Because one of the things, and they talked about this in the documentary, was the fact that Steven Jackson, Jermaine O'Neal, and Ron Artest, or now Meta World Peace, were not able to really talk about what happened. They were pretty much muzzled because of what the NBA went out and did. So it has been great to see this documentary and hear from the players involved, people covering the game, the police and security that were there, also one of the fans that got on the court. So you hear a lot of different perspectives, and now you kind of see their side of the story, especially Steven Jackson and Jermaine O'Neal, who really haven't talked much about it. Steven Jackson, of course, said, "This is the last time I'm talking about this." It's been nice that he's talked about it a little bit more in some media stuff that he's done. But really, one of the things you look at, and one of the things that has come to light recently, was all the raw footage was not made available to the public. When it comes to all of this, we had a lot of course, what ESPN ABC was showing because they were broadcasting the game, and those were most of the images we saw. We didn't see a lot of the security footage and different things. But you go back in time, and what set up all of this happening was it was Reggie Miller's last season, and they had started to make some changes to start bringing some other people in, some younger guys. One of the guys they made a trade for was Jermaine O'Neal, one of the last few guys who came out of high school right to the NBA. You can't do that anymore because of the different rules that you have. And he was one of these guys who started to blossom into a really good player. Reggie even talked about in this documentary that he might be the next person to really carry the banner of the Pacers after he retired. And of course, Reggie was chasing a championship. You bring in guys like Ron Artest and Steven Jackson, guys who were great, just glue guys. Ron Artest, or Meta World Peace, was one of the best defenders you've ever seen. He, again, was a little out there. We talk about that plenty. But he was such a great defensive guy. You were always going to have a shot when you had Ron Artest playing defense on your team. And of course, Steven Jackson was just a great veteran player who was able to go out and have results. So that was kind of setting everything up. The Pistons were a team, too, that were very blue-collar. That Eastern Conference, especially back in the early 2000s, was a very blue-collar conference. And you had the Pacers and the Pistons meet in the 2004 Eastern Conference Finals. And, of course, the big thing that ended up happening in that was Ron Artest and his flagrant foul back against Rip Hamilton in the waning moments of that game really gave the Pistons the edge, and they won Game 6 and went on to the NBA Finals and shocked the world, beating the Lakers. Everybody was shocked that that happened, but around Ben Wallace and Rasheed Wallace and Rip Hamilton and Tayshaun Prince, those guys were able to just outwork the Lakers and win that championship. And so then you go into the 2004-2005 season. The Pacers were one of the favorites to make it to the finals and maybe even win it because of the group that they had with all these guys. So you go in with everything that was happening. Also, it's a Friday night, as Charlie Haddad, who was one of these guys who made it onto the court, he was a season ticket holder. One of the security guys talked about how they were about to pull his season tickets for other reasons that they really didn't get into. And you talk about in Detroit, you've got a very boisterous, very loyal fan base with the Pistons there at the Palace of Auburn Hills. And you have this thing where the Pacers are looking to dethrone the champs. They thought they had a great chance of winning last year, and they come in and think, hey, we're going to take a shot. We're in their place on national TV. We're going to try and win this game. So, and again, it's a very physical game. They're jawing back and forth. Everything's going on. And really, it's a beatdown by the end of it. The Pacers are up 15 with 60 seconds to go. And then Jamal Tinsley, for some reason, told Ron Artest to go get his foul. Because, I guess, giving him a free shot, which is just weird. And you don't tell Ron Artest that, especially back then. That was a bad idea. So, as we switch the page here, Ron did not want Ben Wallace to get a layup, even though the game was over. Really, you're just in garbage time. So he hits him hard, fouls him. Ben Wallace shoves him. And then you have the fracas. And as they all talk about, this happens all the time. You look, it happens every season. You have some pushing and shoving, guys saying anything, but they don't want to really get in a fight. There has to be something truly disrespectful for a real fight to happen. It's all pushing and shoving. No one's trying to hurt themselves. But Ben Wallace, I believe his brother had passed away, and, you know, he was just really upset about the whole thing. They didn't like losing like that at home. But Ben Wallace starts throwing his like armbands and wristbands around, and then he starts going like this, trying to get the crowd, you know, to cheer him and boo the Pacers. But when you do that in such an environment like what they had, where it seemed to be a very hostile environment, that's just asking for things to happen. Then Ron Artest lies on the scorer's table, as we have all seen, and from out of nowhere, the perfect throw. If you look at the video, this guy's name's John Green, grabs a cup, throws it underhand. It is full of beer. I don't know how the centrifugal force keeps it in the cup, but that blue cup lands squarely on Ron Artest's chest, and Artest was trying to calm down from the original fracas, and now he just goes right into the stands. Again, he doesn't attack John Green because he thought the guy next to him threw the cup. You've all seen the footage. It's insane when you look at everything. And the brawl starts. And then, of course, Jermaine O'Neal and Steven Jackson go in to the crowd, mostly trying to get Ron out of there. And, of course, they are defending themselves. And then they finally, that breaks up and things start to kind of calm down. But some of the fans end up on the court, and one of them's Haddad, who squares up like an idiot to Ron Artest. This guy in perfect shape. This guy, not that at all, with a balled fist. Ron Artest clocks him. And as court filings and police and judges have said, he had every right to do that. The DA even said, no, Ron Artest did. And then there was still a fracas. Jermaine O'Neal comes in, slips, but he cold clocks the guy. Haddad, of course, says, oh, that was a cheap shot. Dude, you're on the court. I'm wearing a wrestling shirt. There is a rule, and again, you can argue about this however you want. In wrestling, if a fan gets involved, they're just going to clock you. If you get into that ring, I've seen it many times, and in the WWE, any of these places, wrestlers don't know what's about to happen. They're worried about themselves. They're going to clock you. And that's pretty much what happened. Reggie Miller said the guy's lucky that Jermaine O'Neal slipped when he came in for that punch, or else that guy would probably be eating out of a straw for the rest of his life. And I agree with him. So, and again, you shouldn't be on the court like that. So then, of course, everything just escalates again. You've got more fans. One thing I haven't mentioned at all, security. There was no security involved trying to break up any of this. There were 3 police officers there at the... That's it. That was it. And of course, they're trying to get at least the Pacers off the court. You have, of course, once they start to do that, fans just start pelting them with beer and liquid and whatever. There's even a shot, I believe it's when Jermaine O'Neal's being taken off the court. Someone throws a chair at him, which, I don't know if you know, that can hurt somebody severely. You get hit with one of those. Those chairs are heavy that they have there. So you look at all of this, and of course then everything escalates. Police, by the way, tried to arrest Jermaine O'Neal there for sliding in and punching that fan, and they're like, no, you can talk to my attorneys, I'm leaving, which they did. And then, of course, you had the immediate spin and reaction from everybody. It became this whole idea of that the players were thugs. There was a rap mentality with all this. The NBA has to get its house in order, and that is what everything came about. You have, as Jackson and O'Neal especially talk about, all you have is the edited video from ESPN, and then, of course, the suspensions that came down. That's all you really had as a reaction. None of them, as I mentioned before, were allowed to talk about this at any point in the aftermath of this. None of them were allowed to say anything. They were muzzled by a lot of this. And I think that, again, brought it. And I had that perspective where it's just these players are going out there and the rules don't apply to them. When you really look at it, if John Green does not throw that beer cup, if he doesn't throw it, none of this happens. The rest of this does not happen. And I think that's what the frustrating thing is when you look at all of this, is that this didn't have to happen. But he's upset about something, throws the beer cup. He did some interviews afterward, and he seemed to just relish in what he did. He was even talking about, well, because the reporter asked him, well, don't you feel bad that he didn't attack you and went after an innocent guy? And he's like, well, I just hoped I should have tripped him, which was just insane. And the DA even talks about how, first of all, the DA apparently knew the cup thrower. He had to look at the video, but he realized he knew it from a relationship he had with another neighbor, I guess, and knew that guy. Somehow they had crossed paths. It was kind of weird circumstances that happened. But the DA also made sure to go after all the fans that were involved. It wasn't just the players. And of course, the players got punished more by what happened with in the NBA. Ron Artest was suspended for the rest of the season. Jackson was suspended for 30 games, and then Jermaine O'Neal was suspended for 25. And Jermaine O'Neal went through an arbiter, and they got it down to 15 games. But it was still one of those things where they still felt like they were really defending themselves. It wasn't that they were being thugs. They were trying to save their guy from who knows what can happen. I mean, we've seen hockey fights where, first of all, in hockey, they're just beating the crap out of each other all the time. But we've seen different instances where hockey players have gone and fought fans. And you've had none of this. I think one of the things you run into is you still had this gap between Michael Jordan not playing anymore. He'd been retired, and LeBron wasn't what LeBron was going to become. You had this weird period where you don't have a lot of as bankable stars as you want. So you have to find a way to clean up your image. And I think David Stern did what you think the advertisers and TV was wanting him to do. But I do think, looking back, Artest and O'Neal and Jackson got a bad check. And none of them have said they wanted to be punished. They knew they were going to be punished for what happened. They just weren't expecting the severity or the fact that they seemingly got hung out to dry. Ben Wallace, I think, also got about a 20-game suspension for his part in it, almost in enticing the crowd and shoving, that started the fracas that ended up with the beer being thrown. And people will argue, well, if they hadn't gotten into that fight and Ron Artest hadn't started with the foul, the guy wouldn't have thrown the beer. Those fracases happen all the time. And you've even seen the last few months of the NBA season. You had people throwing popcorn and water bottles at players, and people are like, oh, that's not bad. Yeah, you can see what happens if a player gets loose and gets in the stands. A whole bunch of stuff can end badly. So you look at all of this, and I think, again, John Green did finally get arrested and charged. Everybody else, including Haddad, got probation. And, of course, Haddad believes that the Pistons let him down. He was such a loyal fan, and they threw him under the bus. Dude, you came on the court. You deserve everything that happened to you, to be perfectly honest. And John Green was charged with 2 counts of assault, 1 for throwing the cup, and then 1 for hitting Ron Artest. And it's amazing because the jury found him guilty on 1 assault charge. It was not for throwing the cup. It was for hitting Ron Artest. So the thing that started it all, he was not punished for. He got 30 days in jail and 2 years probation. So you look at all of this. It's weird when you look because, again, you put a bow on all of this. Reggie Miller retires at the end of the season. He doesn't get anywhere near a chance at a championship because, again, you lose 3 of your best players on that team. You have no real shot at the playoffs or anything. I don't even think they made the playoffs. Reggie Miller chooses to retire. And again, he has that one thing that he's missing. It's an NBA championship. And a lot of people believe if you had Artest and Jackson and O'Neal on that team and the Malice at the Palace didn't happen, they could have been NBA champs that season. Who knows? But I think that's a very valid argument. You know, Artest has said he wanted to leave Indiana after the season, and O'Neal and Jackson pretty much thought he was cowardly for doing that. He thought, you know, they could all work to repair their image, and he didn't do that. Jackson, of course, won a championship early in his career with the Spurs. Artest ends up going to the Lakers, now as Meta World Peace, and wins a championship. And again, talking about Ron Artest, how he talked about how he felt bad for Jackson and Tinsley and Miller and O'Neal because he left and got to win a title with the Lakers. He felt kind of guilty. He said he even felt like a coward. He also thanked his therapist. One of the things we've talked about, and especially now that the discussion of mental health has become a lot more prevalent, easy for me to say here on this live video, I think, again, it's something people made fun of him for when he thanked his therapist, even back when the Lakers won that title. And it wasn't that long ago. So it's something that now I think more people understand. Ron Artest had anxiety and depression. Is it an excuse for him to go into the stands and get something thrown at him? No. The guy also shouldn't have thrown the cup. There is plenty of blame to go around. What everybody feels bad for, they say, is really felt bad for Jermaine O'Neal. He was the youngest guy. He was the one who was going to carry the torch after Reggie Miller left. And really that stigma followed Jermaine O'Neal for the rest of his career. He said people who weren't even born in 2004 have asked him about what happened at the Malice at the Palace, which I think is a bad scarlet letter to have. I definitely think the NBA maybe overreacted a bit. I know it looks like they needed to do that. But again, you look at everything and the fact that no one cared after those suspensions about what happened. You know, there were civil lawsuits that no one cared about. All the criminal stuff no one truly cared about. All they remember from the Malice at the Palace was the video and the suspensions. It's the same thing which you look at where a politician caught with a hooker is arrested for prostitution. That's front page news. But when he's acquitted for it, that's on page 25. Like, no one cares. It's the attention-grabbing storyline. This is what everybody really cares about. No one looks at anything else. So when you look at it, and again, has the NBA changed? They have changed their image. When you look at the dress code that got put in immediately following that, I think this documentary, I really think, did a great job of giving us the Untold part of this. I am really glad that Steven Jackson, Jermaine O'Neal, Reggie Miller, Meta World Peace, all those guys, Ben Wallace, were all able to tell their side of this story and give us more perspective. And I want to know what you guys think about it. I loved it. It opened my eyes to a lot of new things that I didn't even think about because I was quick to judge like so many other people. And I want to know what everybody else thinks out there. So leave a comment below about what you think. I'd love to talk to you guys about that down there in the comments. And hey, if you want to have this discussion too, you can follow me on Twitter, Michael_Shibley. You can also check me out. My wife, Mrs. Shibbles, and I are going to be on Twitch. We are streaming there, twitch.tv/Shibbles and Bits. So check us out there. Give us a follow in all these places. I'd love to hear from you guys, and I will see you guys next time.